The signal first reached Earth on a cold winter night in 1794. It came from a star so far away that its light had traveled for thousands of years before touching the small blue planet. The signal was simple but clear. It repeated the same pattern of numbers over and over again. Prime numbers: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Numbers that could not be made by nature. Numbers that could only come from minds that could think and plan and wonder. A young man named Heinrich Schultz sat alone in a small observatory in Bavaria. He was 23 years old and had spent his entire life looking at the stars. That night, his equipment picked up something strange. A pulse of energy from deep space that repeated in a pattern he could not explain. Heinrich wrote down everything he observed. He filled 3 notebooks with calculations and theories. But when morning came, he burned every page. Heinrich believed he had gone mad. No one would believe him. The technology of his time was too simple to prove what he had found. He told no one about the signal, and when he died 40 years later, the secret died with him. The beings who sent the signal were called the Valori. They were part of something much larger, an alliance of 12 different species from 12 different worlds. They called themselves the Consortium of 12, and they had existed for 4 million years. Their purpose was simple. They searched the galaxy for new life, for young civilizations just beginning to reach toward the stars. When they found such worlds, they sent a greeting. A simple message of mathematics that any intelligent species could understand. Most worlds never answered. Some were destroyed by war or disease or the slow death of their sons. Others received the message but were too afraid to respond. The consortium kept careful records of every world they contacted. Earth was listed as species number 7291. Status: non-responsive. Likely outcome: self-destruction within standard galactic cycles. For 230 years, Earth stayed quiet. The world changed in ways the consortium watched with great interest. Humans split the atom and used it to destroy 2 of their own cities. They built machines that could think and rockets that could carry them to their moon. They sent radio waves into space, filling the void with their music and their voices and their stories. But these signals were not directed. They were just noise, the sound of a species talking to itself without knowing anyone was listening. The consortium listened. They always listened. And they waited. Dr. Catherine Moore was 53 years old when everything changed. She worked at the Allen Radio Telescope Array in New Mexico, a collection of giant dishes pointed at the sky. Her job was to search for signals from space, to find proof that humanity was not alone. She had been doing this work for 27 years. She had found nothing. Catherine had been married twice. Both marriages ended badly. She had no children, few friends, and a small apartment filled with books and coffee cups she kept forgetting to wash. Most nights, she sat alone in the control room, watching screens filled with static and wondering if she had wasted her life. November 15th, 2024, was a night like any other. Catherine sat in her chair with a thermos of cold coffee and a sandwich she had forgotten to eat. The night shift was always the loneliest. The other scientists had gone home hours ago. Only Catherine remained, watching the screens, waiting for something that might never come. At 2:47 in the morning, the computer made a sound she had never heard before. A soft chime that meant the system had detected something unusual. Catherine almost ignored it. Unusual signals happened all the time. Satellites, weather balloons, even microwave ovens could create false readings. But something made her look closer. The signal was coming from Kepler 442b, a planet 112 light-years away. Scientists had flagged it as potentially habitable decades ago, but no one had ever detected anything from it. Until now, Catherine stared at the screen. Her hands began to shake. The signal was a pattern. Prime numbers first, just like Heinrich Schultz had seen 230 years ago. Then geometric sequences. Then something that looked like a map of the stars. She reached for the phone and dialed the director's emergency number. Her voice was barely a whisper when he answered. "This is Dr. Moore. I need you to come to the control room right now. We have contact." Within hours, the news spread to observatories around the world. China confirmed the signal. Australia confirmed it. Chile confirmed it. By sunrise, every major government on Earth knew that humanity had received a message from the stars. Catherine did not sleep for 3 days. She worked with teams of scientists from every country, decoding the signal layer by layer. The mathematics were beautiful, she thought. Elegant and precise, designed to be understood by any species with basic knowledge of science. But there was more hidden in the patterns. A star map showing the positions of hundreds of worlds. A history of civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. And a single symbol marking Earth's position, a symbol that seemed to say, "We know you are there." The world reacted in ways Catherine had expected and ways she had not. Some people celebrated, dancing in the streets and crying tears of joy. Others panicked, buying supplies and hiding in bunkers built for nuclear war. Religious leaders called for prayer. Governments held emergency meetings. Stock markets crashed and recovered and crashed again. But beneath all the chaos, a single question echoed across the planet. What should humanity do? The signal was clearly a greeting, an invitation to respond. But what would happen if they answered? What waited out there in the darkness between stars? Catherine sat in her office late one night, looking at the decoded star map on her screen. So many worlds, so many stories, so many species that had risen and fallen without ever knowing about each other. The universe was vast and old, and full of life that humanity had never imagined. She thought about Heinrich Schultz, the young astronomer who had seen the signal 230 years ago and told no one. She thought about all the years of silence, all the time humanity had spent alone, not knowing that others were watching and waiting. For 230 years, Earth stayed quiet. Catherine made a decision. She would not let fear keep humanity silent any longer. Whatever waited among the stars, whatever dangers or wonders might come from answering, one thing was certain. The universe had spoken, and it was time for humanity to speak back. The United Nations building in New York had never been so crowded. Diplomats from every country pushed through the hallways, their voices mixing into a storm of languages and arguments. Security guards stood at every door. Reporters camped outside, their cameras pointed at anyone who might give them a statement. The whole world was watching, waiting to see what humanity would decide. The Earth Response Committee met in a room that was never meant to exist. It had been built in secret beneath the main assembly hall, designed for emergencies that most people hoped would never happen. Now, it was filled with scientists, military officers, and politicians who had been given an impossible task. They had to decide whether humanity should answer the signal from space. Catherine Moore sat at the end of a long table, her notes spread out in front of her. She had not slept properly in weeks. Her eyes were red, and her hands still shook from too much coffee. But her mind was clear. She had spent every waking hour studying the signal, and she believed she finally understood what it meant. Commander Jake Sullivan sat across from her. He was 41 years old, a former fighter pilot who now worked for the United States Space Force. His job was to think about threats, and right now he saw threats everywhere. The signal could be a trap. The aliens could be hostile. Humanity could be walking into a war it had no hope of winning. "We cannot respond," said Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a scientist from Japan who studied alien biology. "We do not know what we are dealing with." The signal could be a trick, a way to find young civilizations before they become dangerous. Or it could be exactly what it appears to be, said Dr. Samuel Green, an American who studied stars and planets. A greeting, an invitation. The mathematics in the signal are meant to show that we can understand each other. Why would they do that if they wanted to harm us? The arguments went back and forth for hours. Jake listened carefully, but said little. He had learned long ago that the best way to understand a situation was to watch and wait. The scientists had theories and data, but none of them really knew what they were dealing with. No one did. Catherine waited until the room fell quiet before she spoke. She stood up slowly, her legs stiff from sitting too long, and walked to the screen at the front of the room. "I have found something in the signal that the rest of you missed," she said. Her voice was soft but steady. The star map is not just a map. It is a history. She pressed a button, and the screen filled with images. Stars moving across vast distances. Lines connecting different worlds, showing trade routes and alliances that had lasted for millions of years. And scattered among them, dark spots where stars had once been. "These are civilizations that destroyed themselves," Catherine said. "Wars, disasters, environmental collapse." The signal contains records of hundreds of species that rose to intelligence and then vanished. Most of them never made contact with anyone else. They lived and died alone. The room was silent. "They have been watching us," Catherine continued, "for at least 230 years, probably longer. They sent the first signal before we had electricity, before we had cars, before we had any of the technology we take for granted today. And they have been waiting ever since to see what we would do." General Patricia Hayes, a military advisor with gray hair and a hard face, leaned forward. "Why wait? If they have been watching us, why not just come here and make contact directly?" Catherine removed her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. "I believe they were waiting to see if we would destroy ourselves first. Based on the star map, most intelligent species do. They wanted to know if we were worth talking to." The Secretary General of the United Nations was a woman named Amara Okonkwo. She came from Nigeria and had spent her entire career working for peace. She listened to every argument without speaking, her face calm and thoughtful. When everyone else had finished, she stood up. "I will make the final decision," she said. "Give me 3 days." Those 3 days were the longest of Catherine's life. She could not eat. She could not sleep. She walked through the streets of New York, looking at the people around her and wondering what their lives would be like if humanity answered the signal. Would there be peace? Would there be war? Would everything change, or would nothing change at all? On the third day, Amara Okonkwo called a press conference. Every television on Earth showed her face as she spoke. "For as long as humanity has existed, we have looked up at the stars and wondered if we are alone," she said. "Now we have our answer. We are not alone. The universe is full of life, full of intelligence, full of others who are watching and waiting to see what we will do." She paused, and Catherine held her breath. Some have argued that we should stay silent, that the risks are too great, the unknown's too dangerous. But I have thought about this for 3 days and 3 nights, and I have come to a conclusion. Silence is not safety. Silence is just a slower kind of death. Amara's voice grew stronger. Humanity will respond. We will answer the signal. We will tell the universe that we are here, that we are listening, and that we want to understand. The message took 3 months to prepare. Teams of scientists worked day and night to create something that any intelligent species could understand. They used the same mathematical language as the original signal. Prime numbers, geometric sequences, a star map showing Earth and the few worlds humanity had explored. At the heart of the message was a simple statement. 3 sentences that Catherine had written herself. "We are here. We are listening. We want to understand." On January 15th, 2025, the response was sent from 12 locations around the world. Giant dishes pointed at the sky, sending radio waves into the void at the speed of light. The signal would travel for years before reaching its destination, but that did not matter. What mattered was that humanity had finally spoken. Catherine stood outside the control room in New Mexico, watching the dishes turn toward the stars. Jake Sullivan stood beside her, his face unreadable. "Do you think we made the right choice?" he asked. Catherine thought about the star map, about all the civilizations that had lived and died in silence. She thought about Heinrich Schultz, burning his notebooks because he was afraid of what he had found. She thought about the 230 years of quiet and how close humanity had come to destroying itself during that time. "I think we made the only choice," she said. The universe was already listening. Now it knows we are ready to talk. For 230 years, Earth stayed quiet. On that cold January night, humanity finally found its voice. The response came faster than anyone expected. Humanity had sent their message into the stars, thinking it would take years or decades to receive an answer. They were wrong. The universe had been waiting, and when Earth finally spoke, the universe moved. On March 3rd, 2025, every telescope on Earth detected something impossible. A ship, larger than anything humans had ever built, appeared at the edge of the solar system. It had not traveled through space in the normal way. One moment there was nothing. The next moment, there was a vessel the size of a small city floating near Neptune, and it was not alone. 13 ships emerged from what scientists would later call compressed space. Each one was different, built by a different species from a different world. They arranged themselves in a perfect pattern around the gas giant, their lights flickering like a message that humanity could not yet read. The world went mad with excitement and fear. Governments activated military forces that had no idea how to fight an enemy from space. Religious groups declared the end times had come. Scientists argued about what the ships could be made of and how they could have traveled so far so fast. But beneath all the chaos, one question burned brighter than any other. What did the aliens want? Commander Jake Sullivan was chosen to lead humanity's first contact mission. He did not volunteer for the job. He was simply the best person available. His years as a pilot had taught him to stay calm under pressure, and his work with the Space Force had given him the skills needed to command a ship in the void. The vessel he commanded was called the Horizon. It was not a warship or an exploration craft. It was a cargo hauler, the only ship humanity had that could reach Neptune in the short time the aliens seemed to be offering. It had been modified with communication equipment and a small crew of 12 people who were either very brave or very foolish. Catherine Moore was among them. She had refused to stay behind. The signal had been her discovery, and she intended to see what it meant with her own eyes. Jake had argued with her for hours, but she would not change her mind. In the end, he gave up and welcomed her aboard. Lisa Park was the ship's communications officer. She was 29 years old, young for such an important mission, but her skills had already saved the Horizon twice during the chaotic launch. Equipment failures, software crashes, and a dozen other problems had threatened to end the mission before it began. Lisa had solved each one with a calm focus that amazed even Jake. The journey to Neptune took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of floating through the darkness, watching the alien ships grow larger on the screens, wondering what would happen when they finally arrived. "They are beautiful," Lisa whispered when the Horizon finally came within visual range. Catherine stood beside her, staring at the view screen. The alien vessels were like nothing she had ever imagined. They curved and flowed like living things, their hulls shifting colors and patterns that seemed almost alive. The largest ship, positioned at the center of the formation, was easily 20 kilometers long. It looked like a cathedral built by gods, floating against the endless stars. Horizon. This is Mission Control. The voice crackled through the speakers, delayed by the vast distance between Earth and Neptune. We are receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. They are requesting direct communication. Jake looked at Catherine. She nodded. Patch it through, Jake said. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was not human, but it was close enough to make Catherine's heart race. 2 eyes, a mouth, features arranged in patterns that suggested evolution under similar conditions. The being's skin was a deep blue-gray, like weathered stone. When it spoke, the words were in perfect English. People of Earth, the being said, I am Counselor Veth of the Valori Hegemony, speaking on behalf of the Consortium of 12. We have waited 230 of your years for this moment. Your silence was noted. Your response was heard. We come in the spirit of inquiry and exchange. Jake found his voice. Counselor Veth, I am Commander Jake Sullivan. On behalf of the United Nations of Earth, I welcome you to our solar system. We are grateful for your patience. Something that might have been a smile crossed Veth's alien face. Patience is necessary when dealing with younger species. You are the 7,291st civilization to answer our greeting. You will not be the last. But you are among the few who answered before consuming yourselves. What happens now? Catherine asked. Veth's gaze shifted to her. Now, Dr. Moore, you learn. And we watch. As we have always watched. Over the following weeks, the exchange began. The consortium shared the basics of their history. 12 founding species had formed an alliance 4 million years ago, created to prevent wars that had nearly destroyed entire regions of the galaxy. Over time, hundreds of other species had joined them. The rules were simple. Any civilization capable of reaching the stars was welcome, provided they abandoned the territorial conflicts of their homeworld. In return, humanity shared their own history. The wars and the peace treaties, the famines and the harvests, the art and the science and the strange, human habit of creating stories that everyone knew were not true. Counselor Veth was fascinated by this last part. You create fictional narratives, he observed during one exchange. You tell lies to yourselves for pleasure. You know these stories are false, yet you find meaning in them. We have seen this behavior before, but rarely so developed. We call it imagination, Catherine replied. It is how we prepare for futures that have not happened yet. Veth was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps that is why you survived. Your species has imagined its own destruction in countless ways. Perhaps imagining it allowed you to avoid it. The days turned into weeks. The Horizon crew learned more about the galaxy than humanity had learned in all its history. They saw star maps that showed civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. They heard stories of wars that had burned across entire, spiral arms and alliances that had lasted longer than the human species had existed. And slowly, carefully, they began to understand their place in the universe. Humanity was young. Humanity was small. But humanity had done something remarkable. They had answered the call. They had looked into the vast darkness of space and said, "We are here." For 230 years, Earth had stayed quiet. Now, floating in the light of alien ships, humanity was finally beginning to speak. And the conversation was just getting started. 6 months after the first meeting with the consortium, humanity learned that welcome came with conditions. The galaxy was not a safe place. The stars were not filled with friendly neighbors waiting to share their knowledge. The universe was old and dangerous, and survival required more than good intentions. The meeting took place aboard the largest alien vessel, the one the human crew had nicknamed the Cathedral. Jake, Catherine, and a group of world leaders sat in a chamber that seemed to bend reality itself. The walls showed views of distant galaxies, images that shifted and changed when you tried to look at them directly. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Counselor Veth stood at the center of the room, his stone-gray face calm and unreadable. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo sat with the human delegation, her presence a sign of how seriously Earth was taking these talks. She had insisted on coming despite the risks, despite the protests of security advisors who thought it was madness to put the leader of the United Nations on an alien ship. Every species that joins the consortium must pass a test, Veth began. This is not a test of strength. You have already proven you are strong. This is not a test of intelligence. You have already proven you can think. This is a test of judgment. What kind of test? Amara asked. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a star map with Earth at its center. A red line traced a path from a distant star system, curving through space toward the sun. There is a species at the edge of your detection range, Veth explained. They call themselves the Krell. 15 years ago, they achieved the ability to travel between stars. Since then, they have expanded to 3 systems. They are aggressive. They are territorial. They do not share. They do not negotiate. The red line on the map continued to grow, reaching closer and closer to Earth. At their current speed, they will reach your solar system in approximately 47 years. They have already destroyed 2 other civilizations that stood in their path. They will not stop. They will not listen. They will come for you. Jake felt his stomach drop. Are you asking us to fight them? No, Veth said. We are asking you to decide what to do. The consortium does not interfere with conflicts between non-member species. If you join us, we will help you defend yourselves. If you choose to stay independent, you must face the Krell alone. If you choose to flee or surrender, we will not judge you. General Patricia Hayes, the military advisor who had joined the delegation, leaned forward. Her voice was cold and hard. And if we choose to destroy them first? Strike before they can strike us? Veth's expression did not change. Then you will be no different from them, and you will never join the consortium. The debate that followed nearly tore humanity apart. Some leaders argued for immediate membership in the consortium. Accept whatever terms they required. Get their protection. Survive at any cost. Others demanded independence. They did not trust the aliens. They did not want to trade their freedom for safety. A smaller group, mostly military leaders like General Hayes, pushed for a first strike. Use whatever technology the consortium might share to eliminate the Krell threat before it arrived. Catherine spent weeks studying everything the consortium had shared about the Krell. She read their history. She analyzed their expansion patterns. She tried to understand why they behaved the way they did. And slowly, she began to see the truth. The Krell were not monsters. They were survivors. Their homeworld had been destroyed by a cosmic disaster, a massive explosion from their own sun that had killed billions. The survivors had escaped on whatever ships they could build, fleeing into the darkness with nothing but fear and desperation driving them forward. They had learned a terrible lesson from their tragedy. Trust no one. Depend on no one. Take what you need before someone takes it from you. Every new system they conquered was another layer of protection. Every species they destroyed was one less threat to worry about. They are us, Catherine told Jake one evening. The 2 of them sat in the observation deck of the horizon, looking out at the stars. 100 years ago, maybe less, we would have done the same thing. We almost did, many times. Jake shook his head. That does not help us now. We cannot negotiate with fear. Maybe we can. Catherine pulled up a file on her tablet. The consortium's records show that the Krell have backed down 3 times. When they encountered species they considered too powerful to fight, they changed course. They did not attack. They moved on to easier targets. We are not more powerful than them. Not yet. Catherine showed him the star map, covered with her own calculations and notes. The consortium has faster-than-light technology. If we join them, if we prove ourselves worthy, we could reach the Krell in 15 years instead of waiting for them to come to us. Not to fight. To show them that attacking us would cost more than they can afford to pay. Jake stared at the map for a long time. You want to bluff them. I want to give them a reason to choose peace. The same reason we had when we answered the signal instead of staying silent. Fear can be overcome, but only if someone offers an alternative. The plan was risky. It required humanity to join the consortium, to accept their help and their rules. It required building a fleet powerful enough to make the Krell think twice. And it required something that many humans found almost impossible to accept. It required trusting that the Krell could change, just as humanity had changed. Jake thought about his own career. He had spent years preparing for war, thinking about enemies and threats and how to destroy them before they destroyed him. But Catherine was asking him to do something different. She was asking him to prepare for peace. If this fails, he said slowly, we could lose everything. Catherine nodded. We could. But if we do nothing, we will definitely lose everything. The Krell will come. They will not stop. The only question is whether we meet them as victims or as equals. Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a fleet of ships was moving toward Earth. Somewhere out there, a species driven by fear and pain was preparing to destroy everything humanity had built. But somewhere out there, the consortium was watching, waiting to see what choice humanity would make, waiting to see if the species that had stayed silent for 230 years had finally learned to speak. Jake made his decision. Tell the Secretary General, he said. Tell her I support the plan. We do not run. We do not hide. We do not strike first. We meet them in the middle, and we give them a chance to be better than their fear. Catherine smiled for the first time in weeks. That is exactly what I was hoping you would say. The final decision was made on September 17th, 2026, exactly 1 year after the consortium had arrived in the solar system. The United Nations General Assembly gathered in the Great Hall, representatives from every nation on Earth sitting together to witness history. Outside the building, millions of people watched on screens in every city, every town, every village on the planet. The whole world was waiting. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo stood at the podium, her face calm but her eyes filled with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. Perhaps it was both. For 230 years, we stayed quiet, she began. We were afraid of what we might find in the darkness between stars. We told ourselves stories of invasion and destruction, of aliens who would come to consume us or enslave us or simply wipe us from existence. Our fear kept us silent. Our fear almost kept us alone. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. But when we finally answered, we did not find monsters. We found others like ourselves. Species that had struggled with the same fears, the same hopes, the same desperate need to survive. The consortium is not perfect. Their history is filled with the same conflicts and mistakes that fill our own. But they learned. They grew. They chose cooperation over conquest. Today, we make the same choice. The hall was completely silent. Not a single person moved. Humanity will join the consortium of 12 as an associate member, Amara announced. We will accept their help in our defense. We will work with them to build a fleet that can meet the Krell threat. And we will do something that many thought impossible. We will offer peace to an enemy that has never known it. Her voice rose, strong and clear. Survival is not enough. We do not simply want to exist. We want to thrive. We want to explore. We want to create. We want to become something greater than we are today. That is the answer we give to the galaxy. That is the future we choose. The applause started slowly, then built into a roar that shook the building. People stood and cheered. Some wept. Some simply stared in wonder at what humanity had decided to become. In the years that followed, everything changed. The consortium shared their technology carefully, one piece at a time. They taught humanity how to bend space, to travel between stars in days instead of centuries. They shared energy systems that drew power from the fabric of the universe itself. They gave humans medical knowledge that cured diseases and extended lifespans far beyond what anyone had thought possible. Catherine Moore led the team that adapted these technologies for human use. She was 83 years old when the first human faster-than-light ship completed its test flight. She watched from a control room on Mars as the vessel disappeared into a fold of compressed space, then reappeared moments later on the other side of the solar system. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she was smiling. Jake Sullivan spent those years building something he had never expected to build. Not a weapon, but a message. He trained diplomats instead of soldiers. He studied the Krell language instead of their weak points. He prepared for a meeting that would determine the future of two species. 15 years after humanity joined the consortium, the human fleet launched toward the Krell. 300 ships, each one carrying the best technology humanity had ever possessed. Jake commanded the lead vessel, his hair gray now, but his mind as sharp as ever. He was 56 years old, and he was about to do the most important thing he had ever done. The Krell fleet met them at the halfway point between their territory and Earth. Their ships were terrifying, sharp and angular, designed for a single purpose. Their communications were harsh and hostile. They demanded to know why humans had come. To talk, Jake replied. To offer you a choice. Through the view screen, he could see the human fleet spread out behind him. 300 ships, armed and ready. A show of strength that the Krell could not ignore. You can fight us, Jake continued. You might even win, but it will cost you everything you have. Every ship, every resource, every dream of safety you have ever had. Or you can do what we did. Answer the signal. Join something larger than yourselves. Stop running from your fear. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. The Krell ships did not move. Their weapons remained powered, but did not fire. They were thinking, calculating, wondering if this strange species was telling the truth. When they finally responded, their message was a single word. The translation system took a moment to process it, then displayed the result on Jake's screen. Why? Jake thought about his answer. He thought about Catherine, who had spent her life searching for proof that humanity was not alone. He thought about Heinrich Schultz, who had seen the signal 230 years ago and been too afraid to tell anyone. He thought about all the civilizations on the consortium's star map, the ones that had risen and fallen without ever speaking to anyone else. Because being alone is worse than being afraid, Jake said finally. We spent 230 years in silence, and it nearly destroyed us. We fought wars against each other. We poisoned our own planet. We came within a hair of ending everything because we did not trust anyone but ourselves. He leaned forward, his voice steady. The universe is vast and cold and empty. The only warmth we will ever find is in each other. You can keep running. You can keep fighting. You can keep destroying everything in your path. But one day, you will run out of things to destroy. And then you will be alone. Truly completely alone. Is that really what you want? The Krell did not answer immediately. They requested time to consider. Jake gave it to them. He had waited this long. He could wait a little longer. 2 years later, the Krell sent their own answer to the consortium's greeting. The ceremony took place in the great hall of the cathedral. The same chamber where humanity had first learned about the test. Counselor Veth stood at the center, his stone-gray face showing something that looked almost like joy. For 4 million years, we have sent our greeting to the stars, Veth announced. Most do not answer. Many answer too late. But today, we welcome 2 new voices to our chorus. Catherine was there, 98 years old now, her body frail but her mind still sharp. She sat in a hover chair beside Lisa Park, who had become one of humanity's greatest diplomats. Beside them sat a young man named Daniel, Catherine's great-nephew, the first human born outside of Earth. 230 years, Catherine murmured. That is how long it took us. Veth somehow heard her, even across the vast chamber. By galactic standards, that is less than a heartbeat. You answered almost immediately. Catherine laughed, a sound that echoed through the ancient hall. Then perhaps we were always meant to be here. Perhaps, Veth agreed. Or perhaps you simply imagined a future worth reaching for, and then made it real. That is what makes your species remarkable. You tell stories about what could be, and then you make those stories come true. He looked out at the gathered representatives. 14 species now from 14 different worlds. The galaxy is listening, Veth said. What will you say? Catherine looked at the assembly. She looked at Jake, old now but still standing straight and tall. She looked at the Krell delegation, sitting stiff and uncomfortable but present. She looked at the stars visible through the great windows, billions of points of light representing billions of possibilities. The same thing we always say, she answered. We are here. We are listening. We want to understand. The chamber filled with sound. Voices and harmonies and frequencies beyond human hearing. As 14 species spoke together for the first time, for 230 years, Earth stayed quiet when humanity finally answered. The galaxy listened, and the conversation had only just begun.